Well, everybody, RCI TV back once again. World Championship on the Friday. And that looks like a WeatherTech sign out there in the background and a really steep hill. This must be Laguna Seca on the bottom end of the corkscrew as we're watching some of these cars out here in the practice session. And it is indeed Laguna Seca, round 3 of the GT3 World Championship here at RCI. And we are, of course, back once again. Nice clear skies out here on the Saturday afternoon practice. However, I've been told by a little birdie or several that rain is on the horizon potentially for the race and qualifying session. However, we said that a lot about Imola as well, and well, it didn't rain quite as much as Imola as we expected. So we're going to figure out how rainy it might be out here in the California Bay Area, my home track of Laguna. Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Jones, and of course, joining me today will be the one and only Stewie behind the cameras as he's bringing the drone down the corkscrew, watching some of these cars come down. And who else would we bring along for the American round of this track other than Jesse Lee?
I'm here too. And yes, hello, Mike Jones, and hello, everybody out there on RCI TV on YouTube. We're glad to have you with us for the next round in the Friday GT3 World Championships. And well, we may be at Laguna Seca, perhaps the smallest in track length tracks that we have in ACC, but they fit a lot of action in a small circuit package, and so different than any other track is this particular one. A corkscrew, as you see here, being the featured turn or turns, shall I say, on this circuit. And Mike Jones, you were talking about the weather, and well, nothing in RCI is for taken for granted, and including the weather. And you can't predict the racing, you can't predict the weather. It's going to be an interesting 75 minutes.
Yeah, you know what? Something has been a little bit predictable the first couple races, though, Jesse Lee, has been George Boothby's domination. He absolutely destroyed Imola last week, did Mr. Boothby in his number 41 McLaren, and not looking quite as hot in the practice session this week, I must say. He is all the way back in 14th position, about 1.4 seconds back on Malinowski, who we're currently watching at the moment up at the top of the grid. However, as I understand, the McLaren, it's not necessarily the best car around here at Laguna. The Porsche does really well around here. It's very agile, at least through most of its stint anyway. And an agile car is really what you need here at Laguna, pretty much above so many else. And it's going to be interesting to see if he can kind of get that triple win off at the top of the season, but I think it's going to be a bit of a stretch for him today. I think that these Porsches are really going to have a strong showing, and perhaps even the Ferraris, who we saw Soldatov out here earlier in the session, put down some pretty good laps, but he's fallen all the way back a second off Malinowski now. That is quite a bit of time off these Porsches.
Yeah, it sure is, Mike. And just one thing that you mentioned that I wanted to go back to, I don't think George Boothby's domination was granted at all. I was suspected that he would have quite a bit more competition, and I think his win total going 2 for 2 to start the season masks the bigger picture here. Of course, race 1, not necessarily the favorite, trailed most of the day, and in the end ended up with the W in the final closing minute of that race. And of course, last week, though, was absolute domination. Well, I think that's very interesting, but I don't know if he can keep that up. Could he go 3 for 3? George Boothby certainly thinks so. He would absolutely love to see that happen, and so would the Boothby family, who so often hangs out here in the chat cheering on their favorite driver in the race. Well, it is an uphill battle, like you said, for the McLarens here today.
Don't you mean downhill battle with the corkscrew?
I see it. I like it. Well, you got to go up the hill to go down the hill. But either way, you cannot overlook James Parker, who has not let George Boothby build a big lead. Despite the 2 wins, despite the near the max point stay that was last week, that has not kept James Parker from getting as close as you like. 2 second place finishes for Parker thus far, continuing their great streak. But what of our series champion, the GT3 world champion from a season ago, Jaroslav Hanzik in the 39? Just not had the pace, Mike.
No, he's not. Yeah, so he's driving the Ferrari in this championship, obviously. And Jardier, he does have some experience in that Ferrari, of course. And the Ferrari should be a pretty reasonable car here. We did just see him put down a P5 lap on the board for practice, and that's definitely, pretty reasonable. It's just going to be a question of, can he keep that up throughout a race? I did just see him come in through turn 6, which is about as deadly as Cheetah at Kyalami. That's that blind left-hander as you start climbing the hill. It is a very difficult corner to get perfectly, even once, more or less, for 75 minutes straight, like today's race will have to be. And, if Jardier can't keep that out of the wall there in turn 6, well, anybody who can't really, it's really going to threaten their chances at continuing on in the championship. Here at Laguna, you do have a lot of sand out to catch you, but the problem is if you hit a curb at the wrong spot, it really can just throw you into the wall. And all sorts of damage here, considering you only have about a 90-second lap, give or take, in the dry. You don't, not a 90-second lap, a little over an 80-second lap in the dry. If you have to come in and pit an extra time and get damage repaired, you're automatically going a lap down right away, done. And that's almost impossible to catch back up from here, especially since this track isn't the easiest to pass on. Here comes Vasily through that turn 6, and you can see a car off there in the distance wrecking himself. That was Mironov, the Ferrari number 2. Let's see what happens by him. He actually catches the outside there. So it's not only the inside curb that you got to watch, it's also the outside. And Jesse, I feel like we talk about this at Kyalami when we did the race face one. It was one of the other at Kyalami as well at Cheetah. You got to be careful on the outside and the inside of the track, and that's really, I think, going to be the key point for the drivers today. Everybody thinks of the corkscrew at Laguna. I don't think that the corkscrew is the most difficult corner here by any means. It's the most iconic corner by any means. I think turn 6 is going to be the difficulty for these drivers today.
I can't disagree with that at all. While the corkscrew is the most iconic, we have seen, in fact, the last time that you and I called a race together here at Laguna Seca, there were several teams in the pro split that were going 2x2 down the corkscrew without incident. It was fantastic racing, but this section here, turn 6 and up the Ray Hall straight, which is what this is called, the space between turn 6 and the corkscrew is the Ray Hall straight. And that is going to be the hot corner. You are going to see a lot of mistakes. The inside of turn 6 is unforgiving. The outside is unforgiving as well. And if you hop the curb in some of these cars, it's worse than others. You will be going for a very violent ride. And there's no consensus either if you're going to go to the inside or the outside wall. And that could make complete havoc of everyone behind you, and we'll have to very closely pay attention to that on the opening laps. Do keep in mind, this is race 3 in the RCI World Championship GT3, and of course, this is the Pro Split, the top class, as qualifying gets started here. 15 minutes to set your quickest lap and set the grid for race number 3, a championship that's been dominated by George Boothby and James Parker hanging on in second place.
Don't leave out Fabian Piffet. Double podiums for him as well.
I will not leave out Fabian Piffet. He is actually not that far behind James Parker as well. We may take a look at points later, but right now, a little bit of business to do. You got to get a lap in. Mike Jones, you're going to get a bunch of opportunities here, but it's so very difficult to hit a perfect lap around Laguna Seca.
It really is. I've been doing a little bit of laps here myself for, of course, our upcoming Chris Hayes Sim Racing Endurance Championship, where, of course, a lot of our RCI teams are participating. I came out here, did a few laps in my Lexus, just get a feel for it. I realized I sent a message over to Bart Macha, who's going to be my teammate for that particular race, and said, Bart, it has been a really long time since I've driven at Laguna because you can really tell when that has, because this track is I think, of all things, as we're seeing Album Bouquet here go over the corkscrew and hit the dirt, he's going to have dirty tires for the first part of his lap. He's not going to be happy with that. But this is one of the more difficult tracks, I think, realistically. Like, it's such a satisfying track. It has such a nice flow to it, I think. But it is a very, very difficult track. Now, Bouquet, he's going to be our first one to brave the circuit here. Let's go on board with his helmet cam. He's going to come across the line. Here's the line here, about halfway down the start finish straight. Comes through that little bit of a kink that is turn one, and then looking for that 3 board on your right to get hard on the brakes into the Andretti hairpin. Double apex corner here. You want to really V this corner so you can get a nice, good run out of it into turn 3, all the way over to the left side of the track, lightly on the brakes, downshifting once into the right-hander, and then looking for just a touch of the brakes here coming in, perhaps even just letting off the throttle, and don't hit that curb. Upsets Mr. Bouquet as he comes across, but so far looking reasonable. Looking for that 2 board on your right, going in through turn 5, a turn that I find so difficult at this track for some reason. And here is the blind left-hander coming up the hill. You've really got to be careful. If you notch yourself right in the dip next to that bump, you can rotate the car so well, but you can't run too left or too right, or you will throw yourself off the circuit. Down the corkscrew, the blind corner through here. Al Bouquet heavily cuts the track. That's going to invalidate his lap as he cuts across the green surface there. Luckily, no dirt on the right side of the track there, so you're able to keep it steady. But that will invalidate the lap, Jesse, and he's going to have to try it one more time, coming into the final left-hander, which is turn 11, and he's going to have to get back on the throttle and try it one more time.
It's so very easy to invalidate your lap around here in certain spots. Just know the rules. You have to have tires on the racing surface in between the white lines, putting all 4 of them off onto the apron or the green surfaces in places. Well, that's going to invalidate your lap time here. We mentioned earlier that it is hard to pass here, and while that is true, I actually find this one of the easier circuits to get side by side with somebody. That does not mean that it's easy to pass, however, because I feel like every time you put yourself in a position side by side, it is just not in your favor to complete the pass due to the way that this track is laid out. It does mean, though, that we can expect some fantastic racing here today. And as qualifying continues to get underway, Mironov in the 2 has the quickest lap right now. I suspect that will not last very long. The 227 of actually now, yes, getting up into the second place position. Very interesting indeed to see. It looked like a Porsche free-for-all early in the late in the practice session, I should say, but it's looking like a Ferrari play date at the front now, with Bellasan in the second place position now.
Yeah, for now, the Ferrari's out on top. Of course, during the practice session, we saw the Porsches really bring it home at the top of the leaderboard. There was 4 Porsches across top. Fabian Piffet comes across the line and grabs it for the Lexus for the moment. The Team Fordzilla 195 really showing that, you know, the front engine cars can go fast around here. However, the track is getting more and more grip as the qualifying session goes through. We do see that the track is in green. It was fast yesterday, which means that it did rain overnight, Saturday to Sunday, in the weather model. And that means that as we continue on qualifying, the track will get grippier and grippier, and we will see the times continue to come down. I would expect them to come down even about another second, realistically here. Of course, we just saw Malinowski as well as Deckers beat Piffet there pretty quickly, with about 5 minutes into this qualifying session. And Malinowski is also trending upwards here by about a 10th on his lap. So he's continuing to improve, and we should see the weather is kind of what I'm curious about. Is the weather going to continue to improve, or are we going to see that rain at the top of the race like we did last week as well? The not the 1111, the 911 Porsche did go down and beat Malinowski by a few tenths at the top. And here's George Boothby all the way back in 12th place, trending upwards on his lap by about 3 tenths. That will be quite a bit of positions. It could push him potentially all the way up to about P5. And let's see what happens when he crosses the line here. He did gain just a little bit of time coming out of that final corner, and he does push himself, but it is only up to P6, as we did see Mironov improve his lap just slightly, if I'm not mistaken. And here's a good one, by the way, Jesse Lee. Yaroslav Hanzik going to come across the line in P5. So the Ferrari's looking really strong here after the first couple rounds. Jardier just not having good sessions. This could potentially be his race, as he wants to defend that title, of course, from winning the last season, as you said, and especially against George Boothby. Vasily Anafriev all the way down to 12th. We saw him in the pit lane briefly. He's coming out for his lap at the moment. But here is another one of the Porsches, the 115 SDL eSport Porsche, back in P13 at the moment. He's about a 10th up the road ahead of his rivals. He's going to gain a couple positions there, but it's not quite enough to push him all the way up. But again, continually improving grip levels through the qualifying session here should see these guys start setting faster and faster times as we continue. It's already trickled down to the mid-22s.
Yeah, of course, the green track may be playing havoc with some of the setups of the cars. You don't really expect to be running on green track conditions, and certainly everybody hoping that it does get a bit better. Malinowski in the 992 coming around the turn 11 area to the start finish straight on a straightaway that is not straight. I feel like we say that every week with pit straights, but is this good enough for the pole position? You bet it is. Malinowski up to pole, a 1:22.302, nearly quarter of a second better than Juan Zimis in the 911. And now Massoud in a Porsche in the 100 jumps up to third, making it a 1-2-3 for Porsche. And now the 227 for SDL is going to make it a 1-2-3-4 as they jump into the third position.
Yeah, those Porsches back at the top of the board. Again, not surprising comparatively to what we kind of saw during the practice session. It's about what I expected to see. However, I am happy to see a couple of the other cars potentially flirt up at the top. And the thing is, the Porsche, we know the Porsche to be the hot lap car, right? The Porsche had its reign through pretty much the entirety of 2020 as just the hot lap machine here in ACC. While they might be out here running these very quick laps, the 331 is going to go ahead and go around, turning just a little bit wide out of turn 10. That's going to throw you sideways. You got to be so careful here at Laguna not to touch the dirt. But yeah, the Porsches, I'm curious to see, can they keep this up during the race? Realistically, I mean, they're running these quick laps in practice here, and not only, again, with Laguna, it's not only necessarily your hot lap times that you can do. It's about your consistency and how well you can drive the track. Because again, and I feel like we're going to talk about this quite a few times today, Jesse. We've mentioned it already. This track is one of the harder tracks to drive and drive consistently, and you gotta not only have the pace and the hot lap time to get yourself out in front qualifying, but you've got to be able to drive this track for 75 minutes without dying, and that is going to be a difficult thing, I think, throughout. Alexander Karsten did just get himself a potential little bit of a bump here, though he is losing a little bit of time as he continues out through turn 11. And I think he's going to have to abandon that lap and give it one more shot in his Bentley before he can potentially work his way up more towards the top of the grid. That Bentley looking reasonably strong in Karsten's hand, which, Jesse, maybe isn't quite surprising. We know Alexander Karsten to be a very quick dude, but he is one of the only front-engine cars at the top of the grid at the moment. The other one, of course, being Fabian Piffet. And Grady, who we talked a lot about last week at Imola. A fantastic drive by Grady with some minor mistakes, and then that pit lane penalty coming out for him towards the end. Really curious to keep an eye on him this week.
Yeah, it is just a story of shifting storylines in this championship so far. We've documented some of the drivers that we expected to have more out of. Well, what about Grady, who was doing a whale of a job that didn't necessarily get the result that they deserved? You have to watch out for mistakes and penalties. They are absolute killers some of the time. Well, what does Anna Frave have coming across line of the 777 down in 18th place? It goes all the way up to 4th. breaks up that 1 through 4 Porsche start at the front, putting his Ferrari, and Ferrari all of a sudden is starting to put at least a couple of the Porsches on notice. And I will be interested to see, with 4 minutes left in qualifying, if Soldatov, Hanzik, or Mironov, any of them in the Ferraris can get up there and deal with it. And what of the Hondas? We've got 2 in the top 10.
Yeah, the Honda, I mean, it's a very quick car. The Honda is exceptionally quick, and it's very good at the ICGT tracks, right? Ooh, well, it's quick and it's dangerous, as Philippe Samard finds out, tries to get himself up off the track. He's going to slow down. I believe that was Fabian Piffet coming up, unfortunately. He'll have to slow down just a little bit to avoid, but yeah, the Honda does really well at these intercontinental GT tracks. We know that. So it has the potential to be quick here if you can hang on to it. And again, the problem with Laguna is that if you can hang on to it is the name of the game. And so, you've really got to be careful with that Honda, but it has the potential to be quick even here at Laguna. And, hopefully we'll see some impressive action out of Samard and Deckers today as they are flirting towards the top 10. Green still on the track. However, times are slowly and ever so slowly trending upwards as we continue on. Kevin Leone for the STL Esports by Logitech G, that's currently in P3. He's trending a couple tenths upwards. That could put him on the front row. Malinowski very flirting with his times. He didn't improve on that last lap, or no, he ever so slightly improved on that last lap. And so he's going to want one more to try to get it back out and see. Jardia that we were just watching, he's a few tenths up on his lap as well. Here's George Boothby, of course, our championship leader. He's a couple tenths up as well. Again, more grip as we go on here. They've got enough time for 2 more laps if he's got the fuel for it, but this is going to push him up into probably about P4. Yep, P5. Okay, he's ever so slightly behind Anufriev, and it is not much between all of these guys towards the top of the field, which is pretty much what we've seen every week for the most part. Pretty much all of these guys are very consistently within a second or at best of each other, and it's going to be a tight field for the remainder 2 minutes. About 2 minutes left in this, as we just said. 2 laps to go here at Laguna. I think that's Malinowski pulling off. Yep, he was pulling off just to let Matthias Wasco by here so he can come up and start his final hot lap. Must have ditched out on that lap. It looks like he's got enough fuel to do one more, see if Malinowski can improve. Wasco, he's going to come across line about 5 tenths up. This is going to push him pretty far up the field. Where is that going to be? It's going to be about P4 for him, knocking George Boothby and Vasily Anifriev down to P5 or P6 and P5 respectively. More Porsches on the top. So far, it is going to be Porsche and Porsche, row 1 and 2. Boothby's going to want the upset, though. He's got the time here coming through turn 11. He was about a tenth and a half up. As he accelerates off the corner, he lost just a little bit of time, but it should be enough to push him above Vasily at least, except it is not. He did not get that valid lap, but he's got 1 more to go. Massoud, Jesse Lee, I think this is either invalid or incredibly quick, and he's about to usurp P1, as I'm showing him trending 8 tenths up, which should put him about a tenth and a half above. Let's see what happens when the H3 Racing crosses. That is a valid lap. Fantastic lap by Massoud here for H3 Racing, a 22.167, throwing down at the end of the session here. Does Philippe Samard have an answer, though, as he's trending up quite a bit, as is Martin Grady behind him?
Well, what a fantastic run for Massoud. I was just going to say, as Philippe Samard goes up to 11th there, I was just going to say, Massoud was the Porsche that was getting left behind. They were as high as 2nd earlier, and Malinowski, who sat on the pole for so long, is not going to get it. Malinowski comes across the line and cannot rival Massoud's lap time at 22.167, the current time to beat. We talked a lot about Porsches, but what about Alexis? Can Fabian Piffet do anything about this? Already 4th. Is there a potential here? I think there might be for a little something more. As Piffet comes to the line, waved yellows behind them, won't matter to him, and Piffet comes to the line and is not quicker, unfortunately,
Mm.
there, as nearly everybody now back into the pit lane, as a couple of teams like Pierre there going ahead and calling it quits, waving the white flag. And I got to say, that isn't who I thought we were going to have on pole. I was certain we were going to have Malinowski on pole, but now we have Massoud. So, what does that do to the confidence of Malinowski? I mean, it is still a Porsche lockout of the top spots, but what does that do to your psyche if you're the driver of the 992, Mike Jones, and now you have work to do?
Yeah, the 992 is going to have work to do, and Malinowski, of course, who couldn't make it to the first race here in the Friday Championship due to some technical issues. He's got time to make up through the championship, and we're going to see what he can do today, as these Porsches are looking really strong here. However, first, let's go and look at these standings. We're seeing two Porsches in the top 10, but they are back in P8 and P10. Cody Pride and Chris Wanzemis back in P8 and 10. McLaren of George Boothby, of course, leading the points by what is that? That's 21 points ahead of James Parker, who's 16 points ahead of Fabian Piffet. Both of these guys, or all three of these guys rather, have podiumed each. That you are looking at the finishing positions for those three in race 1 and race 2. Boothby, Parker, Piffet, round 1 and 2 at the Nürburgring, and Imola for the second one around. So realistically, those guys have dominated the entire race, the entire calendar so far as we go into race 3. Albin Bouquet in his Audi back in P4, and you can see just how close the points are even after the second couple races. So he's only 4 points ahead of Milton Steele Vasson, who just didn't have the best of races. Milton Steele Vasson didn't in round 1. He kind of struggled a little bit, ended up coming home P9, but had that good finish at Imola in P5, and that kind of rocketed him up the points a little bit. Carson Sundstrom, Pride, and of course Grady, who we talked about just briefly a few moments ago. He had a really good race, first and second race, and they got a pit stop penalty coming off the back end of Imola, and had to make that drive through or a stop and go, one of the two. I think he sped through the pit lane and got himself a stop and go, if I'm not mistaken, Jesse. But he said he learned a lot from it. Grady did, and he's coming back here practicing his pit stops a little bit, and he's ready to go for Laguna Seca. And of course, the Wanzemis back in P10. Let's take a look at P11 through P20 in the standings. We've got more of the French, or no, sorry, not more of the Frenchmen. I'm looking at the wrong one here. That is actually Julian Vanbrugh back in P11. One of the couple Bentleys. Well, I say couple. There's about 8 of them on the Friday board. He's 41 points, so only a few points behind P10. And then Herbenow Honzik, who of course we talked about, the defending champion. Not had the best round 1, round 2. He's hoping for a good finish here today to kind of rocket himself up, and he's in a good position after the qualifying session. Dornelis, and then, of course, Joe McCauley, who, Jesse, he's been struggling a little bit in his Lamborghini, but I'm sure he's hoping to potentially come home with a little better of a finish today. Actually, I'm just seeing that Joe McCauley actually hasn't made it out to California, so he will not have a better finish today, unfortunately for him. So he'll have to use this as one of his sign-out routes. And our Massoud Malinowski, there's a couple of our Porsches back in P16, P17. They're tied for the points. So Massoud, our pole sitter for this one, that'll rocket him up a few points because of the pole position. And then Malinowski, of course, sitting on the outside line, coming across just behind him, tied for points in P17. And then the rest of the field there through P20, the Frenchman, the Canadian, and the one from Britain, Grant Wilmot, in his 720S. Just glance through the back half of the field really quick here. We've got Romain Thomas back in P21, Justin Hooley back in P21, Romain Thomas in P22. And then Daniel Jose Jorge, again, just not had the best of races. Daniel Jose Jorge has not. But he'll be, looking for the 6 more rounds to go here. Plenty of time to make that up. Martin Lawrence in his Lamborghini, same as Joe McCauley, just been struggling a little bit the first 2. But he'll be looking to pick those up. Kevin Leone in his Porsche, he'll be looking for a good finish today, of course. Porsche's really strong here at Laguna. he's going to hope for a good one. Warner Deckard, Simon Keeble, Yaroslav Roth, and Yannick Rombach round out the top 30. As we look at the back half of the 30s here, we've got Jordan Soans, Konstantin Salatov, Jules Sky, Darren King. He's not too happy with his finishes so far. He's had a couple stewarding incidents, has Darren King, that have rocketed him towards the back of the field. Mark Vart, Santos, Bellassane, of course, one of Massoud's teammates in the H3 Racing. That's the 888 Ferrari back in P37. Mironov, Dorsch, and Giner back finish off the 40s. And then for the back, for the rather last six of the field, Kovac, Santamato, Yimaz, Favre, Waz, and Vasily Anufriev all the way in the back with no points so far as we're starting to head out on the formation lap here. Sunny skies here in California so far, Jesse Lee. 75 minutes, though. It might rain towards the end. That will really shake it up at the back half if it does.
Well, here are the rules of the race today. You have to have a pit stop at some point in the race, and it is a 75-minute race. We are alternating for the majority of the season between 60 and 75 minutes. There is, of course, a sprint round where there will be multiple sprint races as far as I'm aware. And
Suzuka, round 7.
Yes, indeed. Suzuka round 7. Well, today it is a 75-minute race around Laguna Seca. Laguna Seca is often credited by most people as being in the middle of the desert. Well, I can tell you that's actually not where Laguna Seca is. Laguna Seca is located in Monterey, which is a bay area. Everyone assumes that the brown around the track is sand or something like that. It's actually just dry grass. You come here in the spring, this place is as green as a front lawn anywhere you would find else in the world. It's just most of the time it is dry brown grass. And in fact, ACC has done such a great job of modeling that if you pay close attention, you'll see some small green streaks in the sides of the track. And no, I'm not talking about the runoff zones. So with all of that said, we are getting ready to go green. And we have to ask the question, Mike Jones, and I'm going to put it on you. Massoud has not had the best championship to this point. They have the best opportunity at a win here today to get them back in the championship talk. What do they have to do here, turn 1, to make sure that happens?
I think that realistically, Massoud and Malinowski both are just going to need that consistency, right? You're going to have to get the jump off the line. We talked about this last week, where, the leader needed to get the jump off the line to really keep it steady. And George Boothby rocketed up to the front right at the beginning, and it really worked out from the entire race. If Massoud and Malinowski can do that here, I think that that's really what is going to be what they can do to keep themselves out in front. However, if I had to put a pin in it, Jesse, I'm going to say Fabian Piffet has the best chance at the victory here today. He's such a consistent driver, and that Lexus is such a consistent car that I think he's going to have the shot.
Well, there we go. We are lined up on the front straightaway here, 2x2, literally around the corner as far as the eye can see, waiting for the flagman, waiting for the lights to go out on the bridge. They're across the line, and we are green here for round 3 of the GT World Championship Season 2 from Laguna Seca. 75 minutes, and it's a brilliant start. Several cars going side by side, and there is no consensus. A couple of shunts, and that is going to shuffle the immediate top 10, and more contact. And is that Fabian Piffet there going wide? More chaos in the background.
Yeah, Fabian Piffet, of course, touched the back of Kevin Leone there, I believe it was, and just kind of knocked him a little bit wide. Kevin Leone lost quite a bit of positions. Piffet kind of backed out of the throttle a little bit, and that costed him. But up at the front, we do have Malinowski trying to fight for that P1. Massoud still holding it for the moment, and the 2 Porsches behind them as well. So P1, 2, 3, 4, still all Porsches. Yaroslav Honzik has made himself up into P5. Kevin Leone lost those couple positions after a little bit of a shunt with Piffet, but he's still in P6, and Piffet is really the big loser here, all said and done, dropping all the way to the back. Perhaps the commentator's curse coming out early in the 75 minutes of Laguna, but they're just kind of lining up single file here for the most part. realizing that they just need to kind of get comfortable with the track. It's still green out there. The grip levels are not quite set up yet. They're going to want to get themselves comfortable, make sure they're not sliding around before they get up side by side and make the passes. I do see Jordan Sowens back all the way at the back of the grid. He must have had a little bit of an off as he's trailed off at the back. Here's Jaroslav Honzek under attack now from Kevin Leone. The pit window has now opened. These cars can't pit within the next 73 minutes if they would like. Kevin going to go for the inside down the Andretti hairpin. Jaroslav trying to pin him all the way to the apron as much as possible and is going to have to cede the position as Kevin holds the inside line, which is really where you need to be through that hairpin all the way through there. Great side-by-side action through the Andretti hairpin on lap 2. Here's the wing camera looking back now on the 39 Ferrari with, you can see, Vasily Anifriev out behind, and of course our championship leader George Boothby out behind him in that McLaren. George is really going to be looking for the opening to get past Vasily and make up the early positions so that he can get out in front and get out of the traffic, because that's really what he's going to need to do. Here's a replay of turn 1. We're just going to see the little bit of a, I'm not going to call it chaos, but in the end, it's kind of controlled chaos here at Laguna Seca. 3 wide through most of the hairpin there. Just a couple cars lost out, and we're going to catch a replay of the end of that now as we didn't see it. You see those couple Porsches going wide there, and there's Pivot running wide, perhaps after a small tap, but didn't end up losing too much. That's Milton Steele Vasson, I just noticed, Jesse Lee. That was Milton Steele Vasson's Aston Martin who got sideways there, perhaps after a little bit of a tap. Stewie's going to take us on that replay as well. Does he get tapped back in? He kind of does. Doesn't lose significant amounts of time, but then there's more cars as just one accident happens, and there's just more and more accidents happening because this is just not a very big track to race on. And, that was incidents all the way through turn 1 through about turn 4. But, again, Fabian Piffet, kind of the big loser realistically here. And we're going to take the look at the back of the grid now through the hairpin through lap 1. Before we go back to live pictures here for a few minutes and make sure that we are keeping up with the action. There's Soans there, and that's why he lost out. That was Yimaz. That was part of the reason he lost out. Soans lost out because of another incident. But the top 3 Porsches here, Jesse Lee, have just taken off. Look at that. That is a significant gap between P1, 2, 3 and P4, and we're only about, 3 laps in, give or take.
Well, your whole top 5 now is populated by the Porsches. They have taken the Ferraris out of the equation for now. The top 3 separating themselves, and we didn't talk about it yet, so I'm going to talk about it right now. One of the more important things you can do around here is to not get yourself in trouble with drive-through penalties for exceeding track limits too many times, and I think through the corkscrew, you're going to see more than a few teams and drivers try and get an advantage and try and get as much as they can. Talked to earlier in the pre-race about sometimes how it's very difficult to make a pass. It's easy to get side by side with somebody, but it's very difficult to make the pass. And we saw Leone make that pass look easy on Jardier, and we all know Jardier is not the easiest person in the world to pass at his speed. And Malinowski almost had it timed out correctly, going down into 1, got side by side with Massoud. Unfortunately, could not hold position for the right-hander. That is turn 3, and had to settle back in second. He did fall off a little bit, did Malinowski, but right back on the back of Massoud, and he doesn't have a choice. Juan Zimis right behind him. And of course, those 3 have separated themselves, and behind them is Wasson Leone, who we have here. And look at Jardier now, I've just noticed. That's Jardier in the 6th place position, putting pressure on the 2 Porsches now.
Yeah, Jardier, he's going to go aggressive here early. I think he wants to make sure. Oh, look at this, a move going into the corkscrew. Kevin Leone diving to the inside of Wass there. A great move by him. That is not a good place to pass. Wass must have lost all sorts of momentum.
Oh, Jardier
Jaroslav Honzek gets loose, but gets on past Waz in that 2-2-2. He's up now to P5 with Leone promoted to P4, and Waz has demoted himself all the way back down to P6. He's now under fire from George Boothby, and Vasily Anifriev, who is now behind him. And, of course, Martin Grady back there in P9 as well, and his Bentley just waiting for the mistakes to happen. Here's Soans again. He went off. Looks like it's a corkscrew incident, which we can see quite a bit of. If you just unsettle yourself ever so slightly in a corkscrew, you can't really throw yourself around, and that is exactly what happened with him. It looks like I don't think he touched the wall out there based off where he was parked. You can mostly save yourself at the end of that, But for the most part, it's something they need to be careful with and make sure that they don't. You got to hit the throttle right there. You got to get your steering straight. You got to hit the throttle right there. You will throw yourself around, and we could see that a few times through the remainder of the race.
You're absolutely going to see that. And what about Jardier getting inside the top five? The ultimate opportunist, Saul Leone trying to make the pass on Watts, got it done and followed him through and nearly lost it coming through turn 7. I don't think I've ever seen anyone quite that loose and sideways and save it and not lose position. But here is your new leader of the race. Malinowski has done it. They've gotten around Massoud. Malinowski, after being beaten to pole near the end of the session, fought for it on the opening lap, couldn't get it, stayed patient in second place, and we're going to show you how he did it right here as we go. Of course, we talked about it in the pre-race that on the Rahal straight, you have to make sure you're not going too far to the right. Easy peasy, as easy as you like for Malinowski, getting it done, the new leader of the race, as now Massoud will have to make some magic of his own. And also pay attention to your mirror. Juan Zimis isn't getting any smaller in it.
No, that 911 Porsche doing a good job at holding himself steady at the back of that pack, waiting potentially for another mistake from Massoud again and again. Turn 6 will really get you if you're not careful. Here's a little bit of an off there. It looks like through turn 10, the yellow Ferrari there just went himself off a little bit. Albon Bouquet getting a little on to the right of him and a little bit of a touch there. Milton Steele Vasson looks like he wants to pick that position, and it looks like he indeed did over Bouquet back the end of the straight. So Vasson making up the positions after the incident earlier on lap 1 up in a P15. Bouquet, for of course the EPR team, is in that Audi. He's one of the couple Audis on our grid, and he's a very good driver, is Albon. I'm really curious to see how he handles a track such as Laguna Seca, as I think that again, this is one of the harder tracks to drive realistically, and I'm going to use this track, I think, Jesse Lee, as a bit of a judgment on a lot of these drivers. I mean, these are our top-end drivers. We don't expect them to ever have problems with tracks. There's a question of how consistent can they be throughout this 75-minute race. Here's George Boothby getting a move made on him by Martin Grady, who might lose out to the car behind now. That's the mistake you might make, going through that Andretti hairpin on the outside. If you lose a little bit of time, you can come under attack and under fire from the car behind. Philippe Samard looking for that position and is not able to get it. Grady does a good job defending through the end of sector 1 before they come out into turn 5, but he's on the outside again. There is that Honda. We know that Honda has the hot lap pace. We saw it be pretty strong in qualifying. What will happen through turn 6 here is the question. Actually, it looks like Grady's just going to go ahead and back off, realizing that, this is probably not the best corner to go side by side in. Let's go ahead and let you have the position, Felipe, and you go ahead and go on out of the door. Grady now going to try and just get into a rhythm. He's got a little bit of a gap behind him. About a second to a second and a half is where that's been floating. And he's just kind of got to get himself into that comfort zone and get that flow going, which you can really do here at Laguna once you get that flow going. But these guys are trying to get their flow going up for P5. You also have Hansick and Kevin Leone. While, of course, they're going to be fighting, they got to realize that they're 5 seconds behind P3 now. And I'm trying to decide, are these guys going to continue fighting? Is Jardier going to continue to try to get up, on the side of Kevin? Or are these guys going to kind of flirt a little bit and stick win a 1-2 and potentially try to make up a little bit of time on the Porsches ahead, as those guys are sprinting away, Jesse Lee?
Yeah, they certainly are. You got to be very aware of where everybody is. You got to pick your battles wisely, and a little bit of a touch by Rambach there. And that's going to cost them positions. Very well spotted. There's a car coming up through the middle there. And a couple of taps. And unfortunately, a position lost for the both of them in the contact. Grant Wilmot in the middle of the pack, the dead center pretty much in the 316. Trying to actually just has a bit more space than most people, but Rambach behind him, who will, I guess Rambach's going to attempt that pass again, hopefully a bit more cleaner for Wilmot's sake eventually. And we've been doing this for the past,
Rombach ran a
yeah,
little
we
wide there.
went a little deep. We've been doing this for the past couple of weeks, been taking a look and spotlighting some of the other splits. And I don't know how he's doing this, Mike Jones, but Ricardo Claro, otherwise known as Random Call Sign of the YouTube channel Random Call Sign, go and subscribe to him. He's winning his race here at Laguna Seca after all that stuff that he talked to us pre-race. He's winning.
Yeah, I was just, as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, let me tab over my browser over here and take a look, because yeah, that's exactly what I expect you to say when you said that. Random, of course, he jumped into our box before the race here. He was chatting with us, and he was let's say hesitantly confident in his positions so far in the championship. And yeah, out in P1 for the moment, back over in Split 4. So good work by him so far. Happy to see Ricardo Claro doing well. And of course, as Jesse said, Random Call Center on YouTube. Go check him out. He's a great guy. You can go pull him up on your second monitor and watch Split 4. Our own Ryan Gill's driving over in Split 4 as well. So you can keep an eye on him. And
Random Call Sign faster than Ryan
Gill. Confirmed, Jesse Lee.
Absolutely
confirmed.
What? Honestly, would never have assumed it was that way. I would have assumed Ryan Gill would have beaten Random Call Sign, but you know what they say, every dog has their day. Yeah, and do you want to know? And never tell Ryan Gill this, because I never give Ryan Gill compliments, but I think he is one of the better Lamborghini drivers in ACC. And the way that he wrangles that car, even when it's not handling well, I've seen Ryan Gill finish top 5 in a race where he goes, oh well, the setup was completely wrong and it didn't handle to save my life, and finish top 5, make it look easy. But don't tell him I gave him that compliment, but I'm very impressed with his ability to drive that car, as am I with Milton Still, Vasson, and Vanborough here as well. All involved in fighting here, trying to get inside the top 10 is Vanberg. Grady, who continues to fall back a little bit. We saw Philippe Samard make the pass earlier, and now Vanberg trying to close time from behind. That gap. Yes, indeed. Again, I think a lot of that with that start, it kind of mixed people up. Talk about mixing people up. Fabian Piffet, by the way, who's trying to get back in the top 10 as well. Keep in mind, Piffet was qualified in the top 10 and had that incident in the opening lap. What happened to Pierre in the 26?
And turn 6 happened.
Yes, indeed. The Ray Hall straight, turn 6. All strike at the same time, and folks, that is not the first time you've seen that today. And I would be willing to bet, I would be willing to bet my paycheck that will not be the last time we see that today. I'd actually be willing that wouldn't even be the last several times we're about to see that. But either way, 26 under heavy attack now from drivers behind. Is I think Rambach got around Willimon, I think is what we're seeing there.
Yeah, I think so as well. So that's the Porsche now back behind. Rambach is in front of Willimont. And we have a bit of a replay for it as well, as Stewie's telling me. So let's take a look at that replay really quick here from that potential pass and contact. Let's see. Ooh. Oh, yeah. So the McLaren's looking on the outside going into the corkscrew. Maybe just a little bit of a tap there on the Porsche, and then yeah, look at that!
Look at that move!
He just says, "Okay, good bet," and takes it on the left side of the corkscrew.
Mike
and
Jones
throws it around him.
The number one rule of being a race car driver: go where they're not, and that's exactly what Rambach did, and he profited. So does George Boothby, getting a position here, slow onto the Ray Hall straight, easy peasy for George Boothby. He will say thank you very much.
Up in a P7 now is that 720S Sidebacks Motorwork McLaren. George Boothby, just keeping it steady, realizing that maybe he's not got the fastest car out on the track today, and he's just going to try and keep it steady and keep himself in a good position to capitalize on the mistakes like Vasily just made. And again, it is constant. It's something we are going to see throughout this race. It's something we've seen for the past 16 minutes. It's something we see through qualifying, through practice. If you run wide or run too narrow in turn 6, it will throw you off a little bit. Vasily did a good job at holding his car coming out onto the Rahal straight, but it just wasn't enough to keep him, out ahead of Boothby. You can use plenty of that green runoff there, as we see Malinowski just do, and subsequently miss out behind. But you really got to be careful to keep it up off the brown stuff, because it will just throw your car every which way. And Boothby's just going to keep capitalizing on that. I think that above. Here's the thing about George Boothby. I know you talk about having him solve a CAPTCHA, and I think that's about right. I think Boothby, he's not always necessarily from what we've seen, he's not always the fastest driver out on the track, right? Not always. Sometimes he is. Sometimes he is very much the fastest driver on the track, but Boothby is just a consistency master. That man will hit his mark for 5 hours straight in a sextuple stint, because one of his teammates had to go, and he's still it's 3 a.m. and the man is still hitting his marks down to the millimeter. We're seeing him come across Was right now, get the run out of turn 11 and then just make it look easy coming into the Andretti hairpin, and get the move done, put himself up another position now, up in a P6. And Jesse, again, it's just that consistency. If you can hit your marks here at Laguna, that is where you make up your time. Small mistakes will cost you a lot when your lap is only 80 seconds long.
Well, I can tell you this, if we had a draft process in sim racing like there are in so many other sports, you could definitely make the argument that George Boothby should be the #1 overall pick. And I don't think a lot of people would argue with you on that. And his consistency is key. And the way that he makes moves is impressive, but there's going to be contact here. Grady trying to come back through the field a little bit all of a sudden with the log jam behind him. He's going to go wide as Anna Frave, and then he's going to get through. Vasilia definitely made a mistake there, and that's going to promote Grady, and that's just how easy it happens. And that car is not happy for the 777.
No, he's making all sorts of mistakes. We saw him. He was the one who made the mistake last lap where Was came past him, right? And now he made 2 more mistakes just on that lap again. So Vasily is struggling to find that consistency that some of these other drivers have found so far. Malinowski, a fantastic drive by him so far. He's 1.5 seconds ahead of Massoud, who's 1.5 seconds ahead of Juan Zemes in the 911. These top 6 cars at the moment are doing really great. And there it is, by the way. Vasily's just like, okay, I'm going to shake it off a little bit here. He goes ahead. He comes into the pit lane, going to go ahead and get his pit stop out. Maybe just stand up for a quick second, just kind of shake himself off, reset himself, get himself, kind of in a bit of a better mindset, so he can come back on the track and continue to put down some laps, because he qualified so well. We know that NUF can be quick here. He's just got to get that flow going, and that's what's costing him so far. So back down to P20 as he comes out of the pit lane. He's got plenty of room out on the track to make sure that he can get the next 56 minutes here solid. We'll have to keep an eye on him and see how he does. Jaroslav Honzik, meanwhile, one of Vasily's good friends, of course, still chasing down Kevin Leone here. He's just, I think Jesse Lee, that I might be right here, and I think Honzik and Kevin Leone are realizing that they're losing time to those podium positions and realizing that they just kind of need to get some laps in here. I think Honzik realizes that 227 Porsche is probably about on pace or slightly faster than him, and he's just going to have to be careful, keep steady, and just keep himself within the top 5 rather than fighting, as that is a George Boothby out behind him.
Well, everybody knows to win this championship, it's going to have to come at beating George Boothby. And today, a day where Boothby did not start nearly where you would expect him to. He's already climbed the field all the way to 6th place. And Jardier, who's not had the best 2 races to speak of, will be thrilled to be in the top 5 here fighting for 4th place, but will be a bit frustrated to see Boothby behind him already. Probably wishing this was a 60-minute race instead of a 75-minute race at this point, if we're completely honest. But also, Philippe Simard, keep an eye on the 43, trying to make their way back up inside. We know those Hondas can be quick, and we also know how quick Philippe Simard is. So don't think it's going to be too long, and Simard is going to be by Was here as they're stalking. And I think you might be right, by the way, about Jardier and Leone. I don't know any other reason. Oh no, Philippe Simard's going to throw it off the road. They're going to lose 2 spots here. and all the way outside of the top 10 is Philippe Samard, and over
Catches the
the
curb.
curb, a Dukes of Hazzard move into the dirt, and all of a sudden you go from 8th looking at 7th back down to 9th or 10th.
Yeah, rainy curve off the bottom end of the corkscrew can be deceptively difficult, but especially in that Honda, we know that Honda doesn't really take the curbs that well, and that is the situation right there where, it was a good hold by him, honestly, not to throw himself. He straightened out his wheel. As soon as he hit it, he realized he'd made the mistake. He straightened out his wheel, kept himself steady, lost the couple seconds he was going to lose, and didn't lose anymore. But rainy curve right here that, of course, Simon Keeble's coming through at the moment. This is a bit of a difficult corner if you can get it wrong. It's such a deceptively fast corner. You can really just almost keep your foot in it through that entire curve. And if you let off the gas or tap the brake just a little bit, you can cut it and hit that curb like we saw Samard do, and that's going to lose you, well, potentially quite a bit of time. So I think that was a good job by Samard to kind of keep himself steady and keep himself in a straight line. Keeble's going to come under attack here from Soldatov. Soldatov's going to take a look at the inside of the Andretti hairpin. And again, Jesse Lee, every time we've seen somebody make that move down into turn 1, it has gone just absolutely smoothly for the inside car. That is the place to be down there in the hairpin. And I think that is, was that the Porsche of Woz coming into the pit lane? Yeah, it was. So that is Woz into the pit lane, Stewie's telling me. So that means that he's going to get himself up out of traffic and get his early pit stop out of the way. Is that no, that's not Woz. That was a lap car. Yeah, okay, that was Rombach. Sorry. Stewie's lying to me now, Jesse Lee. That doesn't happen often. Speaking of which, he just got himself a penalty, it looks like, as well.
He already had that,
potentially
Mike.
speeding in the pit lane.
So no, he already had that. He came down pit lane, completed his stop, satisfied the requirements for the mandatory stop, sped in the pit lane. I have no idea why. I do know that's a stop go 30 penalty, and he's had to come back in and serve that. So that's why he ducked back down pit lane. What I was going to mention was I am shocked at the amount of early pitters here, or at least I would be. But I thought about it for a second. I was like, wait a minute. Almost everybody is involved in a battle with a car. It is a tough place to make a pass. Why wouldn't you pit? So I'm going to pose the question to you. Are you a fan of the early pit stop at Laguna with the pack as tight as it is?
So it's such a hard call, right? Because the pit here with 1 liter of fuel is roughly 36 to 40 second stop, right? From in to out. It's difficult to say because realistically, it really depends. You really have to calculate where you're going to come out on track, right? Because the last thing you want to do is come out in another pack of cars that is slower than the one that you are already in, right? If you're up, say, let's take Fabian Piffet here, for example, right? So he knows that he's probably a little faster than Grady, realistically. I think that's, in his head, he's definitely faster than Grady. Ooh, Simon Keeble, what happened with him here before we continue with that thought? Did turn 6 happen to him? No, that's an interesting spot. So coming out of turn 5, he catches the dirt and throws himself sideways. And Jesse, there it is right there. Again, it doesn't matter where you hit the dirt here at Laguna Seca. If you touch the brown stuff, your car goes flying. And Simon Keeble came off on the bad end of that one coming out of turn 5. And it looks like he's been sitting there for quite a while. It looks like he had to return to pit. So that's the MSV Racing, one of the MSV Racing cars going to have a bad day with Simon Keeble behind the wheel. Back to my point on the pit stops. I think Piffet at this point, he knows he's faster than Grady, but I don't think he's losing a ton of time, right? So he's got Grady and Wass ahead of him. If he pit at the moment, he would probably come out behind slower cars that are going to lose him even more time that he's going to then have to fight with. I think that a man like Piffet is probably better to stay in the field, in the pack, maybe losing a little bit of time to his pace, but making sure that he's not out, in the middle of nowhere with traffic that's definitely slower than him.
Meanwhile, out front, Malinowski leads by 2.7 seconds. The gap going up to Massoud. Massoud qualified on pole in front of Malinowski, and following a little slip up, Malinowski squeaked by. The gap remained close right up until about 5 or 6 laps ago, and it has started to go all Malinowski's way. Juan Zimis in third place, 1.6 seconds back. And of course, Leone, who has driven up to the fourth place in the 227, are all inside the top four. And what happened to Malinowski here, I wonder? Is there something? Yes, a car going off in front, a car slamming on the brakes, and that's how quick it can change. And that was near disaster for your leader, Malinowski, but it didn't come to that. You know, Malinowski, better known as Tortellini, or as I call him, Pasta, out there getting it done. You have to keep your head on a swivel, and you cannot allow yourself to be distracted or take corners for granted, as Martin Grady here is going to lose it, and they're going to have to split him 3 wide. He's the hot dog in the bun, and nothing else happens of it, but Fabian Piffet is going to gain a couple of spots.
Yeah, Pivot again, and this is what we just keep referring to, right? Small mistakes here at Laguna can really make it happen. We're going to watch the replay. The Honda runs wide, very, very so slightly touches the Bentley, and there it goes. That slight mistake will lose you just that little bit, and the Bentley's not going to be too happy with that one, of course. But hey, that's why we got the live stewards here today. Tom Bryan, of course, heading up that stewarding team. Jake Boswell heading up the race control, delivering all the messages out to me and Jesse about what's going on with the penalties out on the track, and they'll be keeping a rough eye on these guys today. We got 7 stewards out of the box today for this 75 minutes of Laguna Seca. So big shout out to them for helping out, and of course Stewie behind the cameras helping out me and Jesse, running all the replays and the cameras for you. And Jesse Lee, Simon Keeble's 962 MSD Racing teammate, is really hoping he doesn't end up the same way Keeble does, but he's been chasing Mark Bart here for a while. It looked like he was faster than him earlier, but the Ferrari looks like he's picked up a little pace now.
It's all about that track, and also you're watching the replay from the start of the race for good reason. 15-second penalty for the 19 car. The 19 took out the 962 and caused him to lose more than 5 places, 6 it says. So 15-second penalty for the 19 for the crash that you just saw, and a 5-second penalty for the 331 not holding brakes after an incident and taking out other cars. That car has since retired the 331, and I was pleasantly surprised to see Jake, the Bossmeister Boswell, handing me the slips of paper here. But replays, of course, showing you the carnage at the start of the race. This was a bit of a scrappy start, I think we'll all agree.
Yeah, a bit of a scrappy start, definitely. Those first few corners were a little bit rough, and a couple people definitely lost out to that. But, you know, for the most part, I think there was only like one bad damage throughout that, and that was Soans towards the back of the field, who has unfortunately since retired the car. I think that was about it, but I could be wrong on that. Perhaps we've had more. Another. Oh yeah, actually the 115 car also did a little bit of a retirement. Pedro Santos also looks like he has retired the car within the past couple laps. That looks like it was just within the past couple laps though. So something else happened to the 86 rather. Malinowski now catching up to lap traffic. He's got the Lamborghini. Martin Lawrence out ahead of him. And that is not something we get to say very often. Martin Lawrence getting lapped about 20 laps into a race. But, of course, he has already made his pit stop. That's about 45 seconds in the pit lane for him. And then, you know, a rather fast Porsche that has been driving around pretty well so far. And that's going to put him a lap down all the way back in P25. Steele Vassen and Mark Bart here, fighting for what is effectively P11 once that penalty is served, of course, by Vanbrugh. We're shoving Milton a little bit there early on in the race. These guys still nose to tail here after about 15 minutes when they've been hooked up. And, of course, up near the top of the field, Kevin Leone and Jaroslav Honzek are the other group that's been hooked up here for about 20 to 30 minutes. They're just a few tenths between each other as well. Just haven't been able to sort that one out long term or not. But they continue to lose time to P3. Juan Zemes now 11.5 seconds ahead of them. Looking at this battle here, Vanbrugh is about, what is that? Not quite as far, obviously. They're only about 2.5 seconds behind, which is about 3 seconds behind Grady. in the Bentley out ahead. So they've got plenty of time here to make up. And Jesse Lee, have you been doing the maths yet? Have these guys been catching Grady for P10?
I think they are, in fact, doing that. I think they are ever so slightly, and I think Milton Still-Vassen's about to expedite that process, going in the long way around turns 1 and 2. If they can hold on to this, or maybe even turn inside, this would be beneficial, but nothing doing for Milton Still-Vassen as Mark Vart covers the inside very well indeed. That can come off if you're willing to risk it, but I don't think still Vassen is willing to risk that. And I think that's why Jardier, by the way, is still behind Leone. I think that there is sort of some co-opetition going on, but I also think that there's a certain point where you're just not willing to risk it. You look up at the time, and you're so used to running 60-minute sprint races and the flashing of the lights. This is Mark Vart's diffuser cam looking back at the front of still Vassen's powder blue Aston. And you could see the lights flashing, letting Mark Vart know, that is, that, hey, man, I would like to get by you. If you could help me out here a little bit. I don't want to have to force a move here. But I also think Jardier is in the same situation for 4th place, just sort of biding your time. A lot of these teams used to that 60-minute race. This is a 75-minute race. You've got a lot more time to sit and think about your maneuvers, and a lot more things can go wrong. And in fact, again, we've already saw our first speeding penalty in the pit lane, and I don't think our first drive-through for track limits is that far off either this time. By nothing doing again. I think, again, just very cautious indeed. But speaking of cautious, Fabian Piffet, who absolutely benefited whenever Samard and Grady came together earlier, but you see the damage on Piffet's Fordzilla Lexus from that contact on the opening lap.
Yeah, Piffet's been doing pretty well, just keeping himself steady. He's another one of these battles that just, is just nose to tail, just a few tenths apart, just kind of waiting for the mistake up ahead. Piffet's been great at making sure that he's making the moves when the mistake happens up ahead. And like I said at the beginning of the race, I was going to give Piffet the best chance of potentially, bringing home the consistency victory here. And he's definitely got the potential for it today. Of course, Malinowski doing a very, very good job up at the top of the field so far. Oh! Fabian Piffet, he maybe catches a little bit of the dirt there. And just, again, you touch the brown stuff here and you throw yourself. We're going to see what happens. Yeah, catches the right side and just throws himself around. He's got to get up off the track to make sure he's not in the way of people. And Jesse Lee, I am never going to mention Fabian Piffet's name in a Laguna race again, as I am 0 for 2 with him, mentioning him and how well he's doing. And the man getting turned around. So there's a Lexus out on the grid somewhere. Unknown to me, invisible, cannot see them. Hopefully not invisible to the other drivers. But Jesse Lee, is that a McLaren 720S on the tail of Jaroslav Honzik?
So here's the thing. George Boothby has caught Leone and Honzik, but let me tell you, George Boothby is not going to sit behind these two. So Jardier now has a choice to make, as you already see Boothby show the nose, showing the intent of what the McLaren is willing to do to get around these two to have potentially a shot at a podium. Could George Boothby go 3 for 3 with podiums on the season? I think a win is a little out of the question today, considering how far back he started, but a podium, very much a real option. So what does Jardier do? Does Jardier force the pass on Leone, or does Boothby brute force a pass of his own? We're going to have to find out. And a couple of you are probably wondering, why are the curbs so dangerous here? Well, in my driving experience, it's because this track has a lot of camber to it, and the curbs have the opposite camber, or off camber, if you will, to the way that the track is turned. So if you go onto those curbs and then go back off of it, it unsettles the car and makes it incredibly hard to catch, especially if you clip it with the rear of the car. The front of the car, not so much of a problem. The rear of the car, an absolute animal when you go past the curbs, because they almost always are curving the opposite direction of where the track is. Case in point, George Boothby goes on the curb. What did the curb do? It spat him back onto the track, and that very easily, for a lesser driver such as myself, could have ended your day.
A good hold by George Boothby to keep himself straight through there. A little bit of a wiggle across the wheel, but kept himself steady for the moment. Switching back over to Milton Steele Vass, and of course, who's still chasing down Mark Bart, and that's Fabian Piffett now out behind them. He lost 7 positions overall in that little mistake he had. Alban Bouquet catching a bit of a replay here back through turn 1. Doesn't look like too much happened as they're kind of coming through turn 3 back in P18. I was waiting on the okay. Well, the McLaren
Well,
got pulled
that
over.
was interesting.
I'm gonna look back at my replay machine and see what happened. Stewie's telling us that Grant Wilmot was that McLaren, and he realized that he was actually not fighting for position in that case, as he has not pit.
Yeah,
so
even still though, Mike, that's so strange. He basically stopped at a McDonald's on the way home. I've never seen anything quite like that.
Speaking of stopping at McDonald's, Boothby here might pull a drive-through here pretty soon on Jaroslav Hansa. He's back on. He's back on the nose or the tail of that 39 Ferrari, and he was all over him on turn 5 as they came down the little straight that happens between turn 4 and turn 5 here at Laguna. Wasn't able to make the move this time by, but we'll see if he's able to get a run down the front straight and perhaps poke his nose under him from the Andretti hairpin, get himself some McNuggets on his way up to Kevin Leone.
Oh, here we go. It's all Nick jokes
is George Boothby. Can you tell I'm hungry?
Yeah, I'm thinking about dinner after that myself. For those of you in the European time zone, we know it's past dinner where you are, but where Mike Jones and I are, it is we're still in the pre-dinner planning phase. An additional penalty to tell you about is Julian Vanbrugh is going to lose it there, coming out of turn 11, but we quickly switch back over to this very compelling battle between Leone, Hanzik, and Boothby. And one other penalty to mention, the 288 received a 5-second penalty for causing avoidable contact, but they have parked the car and the garage door is down for the 288 team, so that penalty will not really affect them. The second car today to get a penalty that has closed up shop for the day, and Milton Still Vassen trying to get the pass done, nearly forcing the Ferrari off there, but not quite, as just enough room was given in a drag race down into turn 1 and 2. And I think Still Vassen, yes, indeed, as you see here, was the recipient of that pass, getting past Mark Vart finally. I felt like that was going on for about 15 minutes, and finally so relieved for the 962 MSV car as they get that pass done, and now can set their sights to the job in front. But that's basically good enough for 10th, even with Vanbrugh still in front, because Vanbrugh has a 15-second penalty. Philippe Samard racing inside the top 10, still trying to get past Was in the 222 Porsche. And of course, Was has Grady, who's pulled up here. Remember when we said earlier, Grady was sort of falling back in the pack? Well, Grady, something after the track, I don't know, it went fast, and now back to optimum, has seems to be finding his rhythm, finding his pace, at least to catch up to this group, as Samard continues to try and get around Was to no avail.
Yeah, the problem with Samard so far in that 43 Honda has just been mistakes. We've seen him make multiple mistakes, throw himself backwards in the order, much like we've seen a couple of the guys here do today. But the question can be, we've got 35 minutes left on this race. Over half this race is gone, Jesse Lee, which seems surprising. It seems like we've only been out here for about 15 minutes, but there's another little mistake by Samard. Luckily, it's in a good spot, and he's able to keep it steady, not lose any time there to Was. But he did hit the dirt there, and as we know, that can be very dangerous in multiple locations in this track. Luckily, he hit the one that wasn't. Takes a quick peek at the outside, just showing his nose to the Porsche in front as they come into the corkscrew. But he lost a lot of time actually coming through the corkscrew that time. Lost himself a couple tenths, and Grady's now breathing down his neck, and Samard might have to be concerned that he doesn't have that buffer of the Porsche out in front of him. Let's see if he gets the run coming out onto the straight. That Honda, known to be so good down anything that looks moderately straight. But it looks like the Was is just still getting a good run coming off the corner. And it seems like that's where Samard is losing his time so far through this race. Has just been, weak exits through some of these turns, and that is not where you want to be losing time here in a Honda. We're going to catch a replay back towards the back. Here's P22, Konstantin Solotov. I believe that's Grant Wilmot out ahead of him. And nothing really happened quite there on that replay, unfortunately. But we are going to see him be just behind Vanbrugh, or just ahead of Vanbrugh. Stewie's now telling me that just before that replay would have come in, unfortunately it didn't queue to it. But Solotov got by the car behind him. New penalties coming out here, Jesse Lee, is Jake Boswell. And, hang on a second. Yaroslav Honzik ran a little bit wide coming in out of turn 10, and that has promoted George Boothby up. Sorry, that was not turn 10. That was turn 4. I always get, it's so easy to get turned around here at Laguna Seca, I feel like, because all the turns look so freaking similar. But that was turn 4. He ran a little wide. George Boothby promoted himself up, and now he's got a Porsche to chase down. And Yaroslav Honzik is going to need to make up that time again. That's about the first mistake I think I've seen him make, though. And, Jesse Lee, do you remember? This is something I will never let Jardier forget. Do you remember that Porsche Cup race about, 10 months ago at Laguna Seca?
I do definitely remember that. We're going to have a car sliding off into
braking
turn
mistake
11.
Again. Samard making the braking mistake again into turn 11. Stewie thinks he may have got touched just a little bit, but, of course, the stewards will take a look at that one. But Samard just not having. I mean, don't take me wrong. He's still in the top 10. So it could be worse, but he is having a bit of a struggle, Jesse Lee.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Jardier, that Porsche Cup race about 10 months ago where he spun on the formation lap.
Yeah, qualified on pole, did Jardier, came around turn 11 spun, started dead last. And
then came back and passed Chris Huque out of the final corner on the last lap.
Yeah, I remember that. And Chris Huque doesn't remember that, by the way. But we all remember that as one of the strangest races. I have seen a lot of racing in my lifetime. I've never seen anything quite like that. The man who out-qualified the field by a ton spins it right there down to the inside of turn 11, says he just got on the gas a little too hard, started dead last, 20-somethingth place, came back through the field, and on the final turn, coming to get the checkered flag, passed Chris Huque in the inside, drag race to the line, and the man who qualified first spun, drove through the field, won the race. The only time I've ever actually seen and got to use the phrase spin and win. But there you have it. And Jardier, the smile on that man's face after that, the wry, smug smile of, I got away with one right there. But you know who didn't get away with one? Some of the people on these papers. 5-second penalty for the 199 for a minor takeout, making the 316 lose a position.
Ooh.
We saw that earlier.
Interrupt you real quick, Jesse. Grady going for a bit of a move on the inside of the corkscrew here. Gets a good run on Waz, and he's actually going to get it done before Rainey curved there. The Porsche ran a little bit wide, going side by side there, and a good move by Grady, really making that happen. That is not where you expect to see the path. Rombach here, who you were just speaking about having that 5-second penalty, he's off on the back end of the hill. I believe that is a very damaged looking Porsche. He's barely going to make it back up. Yeah, Stewie says he's losing probably about 40 seconds, give or take. That was coming out of turn 6. Look at this. Was coming back a little bit on Grady into turn 1. Not able to get it done, though. Wide on the exit, or into the entry of the Andretti hairpin. But yeah, Rombach, of course, who was in one of those Porsches looking strong earlier, now gonna have to lose quite a bit of time. But Jesse Lee, I apologize. You were going through some penalties as Mark Grady was making a bit of a move.
No problem at all. The 199 of Rambach there with the penalty for the contact earlier, causing a car to spin, and the 68 of Soldatov given a 5-second penalty for, quote, a forceful overtake. So Soldatov with a 5-second penalty. And Our good friend Jake the Bosmeister Boswell has told me that, well, he's not done just quite yet, as that was Grady getting all sorts of sideways coming down the corkscrew. There's many ways to take the corkscrew, Grady, and that was definitely one of them. Of course, we have George Boothby's dad in the chat as per usual. Hello, Mr. Boothby. And he says, while we're talking about fast food, apparently George Boothby once won a year's supply of KFC as a prize for winning a gaming tournament. Now that is a prize.
This is the 5-second penalty from earlier on in the race. Perhaps no, just a bit of an overtake by Rombach. So a bit of a replay with him, but this is just a bit of an overtake out of the final corner a little bit earlier on. So Stewie was trying to track down that replay for the penalty that he got, but wasn't able to quite grab that. We're going to try one more time here. Here's might be the touch of the incident here, and yeah, that's what it looks like there. Yeah, definitely some minor contact there, Jesse Lee. I think Jake Boswell going to hit that one on the head. Some minor contact, minor time loss. I think a 5-second penalty there is a perfect little situation. However, the man on the mission today, Malinowski, a.k.a. Tortolini, out here now. What is this? Mr. Pasta, 5.5 seconds ahead of Masada in that H3 Racing number 100. Malinowski just having an absolutely dominating drive here in his 992 Porsche so far. 27 minutes and change to go. He does have, of course, his pit stop to make. Hopefully, if he can go in and nail the pit stop, he should, still be good to go. He's got plenty of buffer room here to make sure that he's not losing time in the pit lane. He doesn't, need to get fancy. He doesn't need to, come in too hot. He can, engage his pit limiter just briefly early and everything like that. And something I'm seeing here, Jesse Lee, as I'm monitoring some of the streams, I'm seeing George Boothby, I believe, going to be coming into the pit this time as he underfueled himself a little bit for the start of the race, and he's making a tad bit of an early pit stop, I believe. So that might break up that battle up at the top of the field here very briefly pretty soon, as he's going to be running out of fuel. They're coming out through the back end of the hill at the moment, and we're going to see at least him come into the pit lane, checking in on Jardier as well, just because I'm curious. Now, Jardier's got tons of fuel left, so he's going for that early or that late stop. So Boothby's going to lose a little time in the pit. He's got to take about 40 liters of fuel. That means that he's going to lose probably about 8 seconds or so on fueling. That might be a little bit of time loss there that he might not have wanted, and perhaps a mistake made in strategy by him, but perhaps not. I'm not going to be the one that's going to question George Boothby's strategy, as he is indeed diving into the pit lane right now. Philippe Samard back over on the backside of that 222, though. Will he make the mistake again, Jesse, or will he get the pass done this time, we think?
I think he'll get the pass done, but clearly I think that Honda is a little bit of a handful around here. I'm not so sure it's all Philippe Samard's doing today. I think he's sort of hanging on and doing a good job of it inside the top 10. He will be frustrated at himself, obviously, that he's not further ahead, because certainly he knows he could have been, but rather besides the point. And speaking about Boothby pitting early, that is a unfortunate maneuver there, to have to come down the pit lane and change your strategy slightly. I don't think that's going to affect him in the long run. In fact, it actually might help him if it gets him into some clear air. He might be able to pass Leone by running quicker laps than actually having to overtake him, and that certainly would be the easier way to do that. But every lap that he spent behind Leone, well, folks, it's that time, isn't it? I've been doing the maths, and I'm gonna
take a water break.
I don't think George Boothby has a chance to finish on the podium here today. He was about 20 seconds behind Juan Zimis in third place, and at his highest pace that he was in the race. Now, take that with a grain of salt, because he was mostly in traffic. I don't think he had the pace of the top two or so. And beside the fact that Juan Zimis has actually caught Massoud pretty much, remember that gap was several seconds earlier. It's down to 1.5 now. I don't think that's likely, though I do feel like if that pit stop was quick enough, I don't think he'll have any problem with Boothby taking Leone in the 227 for fourth place, which would be a fantastic finish considering the only one that he's really racing in the top three or top five is Juan Zimis. Malinowski is 14th or 17th, I can't recall which, in the championship, and Massoud is not quite up there either on his level right now, though this will help them both mightily as Philippe Samard very clearly on the back of Was now in the triple two, trying to get it done this time through the Ray Hall straightaway, looking to the outside again and trying to get as far over to the right as possible to straight line the hairpin, and all he finds is Was in triple two in front of him. But yes, I believe fourth is very much on for Boothby. I'm not so sure that anything else is. And just taking a look here of a curb clip by Philippe Samard, getting very close indeed to making the same mistake again. What's that old adage, Mike Jones? Fool me once, shame on me.
Fool me twice. Well, that'd be shame on Samard for that one. So, luckily he keeps it off the curb that time, but loses just that little bit of time to Was, realizing that he might hit it and had to kind of straighten his wheel out. Here's the H3 Racing P2 Porsche. Over 100 of Massoud. Still falling down to Malinowski, 6.5 seconds back. However, Juan Zimis is only 1.3 back from him now. So realistically, we might see a battle for P2 shape up here, which is not going to necessarily go in George Boothby's favor if this happens through the end of the race. As you said, Jesse Lee, Juan Zimis is the closest one to him in the points, out ahead for the moment. So, there's this gap has, been within that kind of 1 to 2 second mark throughout the race, but currently closing back up. And I think that might really come down to the pit stop, as as we very well know, based on especially looking at Nürburgring with the pit stops that happened there, and the strategy that played out towards the end of the race. Those two Porsches could decide their battle in the pit stop. If somebody misses their pit box ever so slightly, 2 seconds could be made up somewhere, and that could really mean that Juan Zimis could be up in P2 by the end. Of course, Malinowski could, find himself with a mistake and drop back a little bit to that battle as well, through the remaining minutes here. But battles going on throughout the field. Vanbrugh is looking back through his wing at the Lamborghini 171 of Martin Lawrence. And again, Lawrence just not had the best time in the Lambo through the first three. Oh, there he goes. He might have a good time now. There's a position for him. Vanbrugh catches a curb in turn 6, going to lose 2 positions. Saddletop going to go past him as well. Of course, Saddletop has that 5-second penalty at the end of the race. Catch a bit of a replay here through the helicam, and you can see him just turn in and boop, bounce over that thing.
All over it.
Even in that big Bentley, that curb will still throw you. Good on him to realize that Saddletop was coming up, though, as Saddletop was not going to stop. He was going to go past him one way or the other, and he needed to realize that and gets out of the way. And that will resolve that battle for the moment. Lawrence picking up a position in P22 near the trail end of the points. Of course, we give points all the way back to P30, which means that pretty much everybody that's remaining in the race will get themselves points here today. Field just a little bit lighter than we may have expected today, of course, because the SRO race going on, but that is, of course, always to be expected. We got big esports events going on. Some of our drivers had to sign out of California, and they're out in Monza to do the, I think it's an 8-hour race or something around that ride. I'd have to check in on Dalking's stream and see if he's, I think he's still streaming it. I'm going to take a look at it here in a little bit. Philippe Samard, though, still over the back of Was. 20 minutes to go. They've got, pit stops here within the next 10 laps before they're going to have to make sure that they get all this done, or not within the next 10 laps. Sorry, probably about the next 7 laps. Before they make sure they got to get that all resolved and done with. And I think that's really going to break up all these battles the same as P2, P3. It's going to break up a lot of these battles that are going up and down the field, Jesse, with these guys just nose to tail in packs of 2, maybe 3 throughout the entire field. Samard really looking at the inside there in turn 6, realized better of it, did not make the dive, but we've seen a couple people make moves in the corkscrew. Won't be this time by. Ooh, look at that. Oh, that could not have been closer. That Porsche of Waz. Samard is out braking Waz pretty much at every single spot. We saw him twice in turn 11. Twice in turn 11, Samard had to, hit the eject button and realize it is. But, I mean, look at this. He's going to close all the way up to him again. The problem is that Porsche is just getting legs on him coming out of the corner. And Samard is not going by the old adage that, perhaps I don't know, Jesse Lee, is this the one for you too? Of course, we grew up on NASCAR quite a bit. Slow in, fast off, and that's really what Waz is doing at the moment. Samard isn't.
Yeah, I definitely got told when I was very young that was all just sort of a lie, and it was fast in, fast out, and that's the person that takes home the big check at the end of the day as well. So I think perhaps just really good on the brakes is the Honda. For a split second there, I wasn't sure if we were looking at a camera connected to Waz or Samard, and I'm quite convinced that neither did our broadcaster Stewie after that. That was very close indeed. I'd always been interested in how the broadcasters, as we may have a move here, you're going to give him the nose, looking to the inside. He's going to force it. It's Philippe Samard. He's not going to let him have it. And down the inside of the course, and he loses it. He's going to lose it. And Waz goes back through. Samard with the power move, and it doesn't come off.
Yeah, he gets sideways. That corkscrew with that such off-camber turn that you get. You've got to turn left, and then as soon as you start going downhill, it cranks to the right, and Samard just loses it, gets that little bit of sideways, and Waz gets back past, but he made the move. That's the thing. He made the move, and he didn't throw himself too far off, realistically. Oh, look at that! Goes onto the pit exit straight as Waz gets really slow coming down the kink, makes the move down through the Andretti hairpin. I don't know how the stewards are going to think of that one, Jesse Lee. That might be a little bit of an off-track moment there. I'm not sure if that's quite ruled as being on track or not, but Samard finally getting the move done for now. The question is, he's got to pit here within the next 15 minutes. Let's see it again.
Just going to say I wanted to see this again.
Let's see what happens. Does he cross? Yeah. Oh, yeah. He crosses the solid white line. Yeah.
What do you think the stewards are going to say about that, Mike Jones? I don't know if you can do that.
I don't think you can. You crossed the solid white line, Philippe Samard, and that might cost you. I'm sure Tom Bryant's going to be reviewing that one with the team here shortly.
Just so we're clear, the rule that we're concerned about is not the fact that he went onto the pit lane. It's the fact that he went off track and made an overtake. That is very clearly outlined in the rules that you cannot go off track and gain a position or time, and that's exactly what they've done there. So I don't know. I'm not very sure how they're going to look at that. I'm definitely glad I'm in the booth with you today, Mike Jones, and I don't have to make that decision because that was a heck of an overtake and a crafty one at that, but perhaps going off the track to do so might draw him the ire of the stewards box. Certainly they'll have a conversation about that if they feel that that's out of bounds or not, or perhaps if Waz forced him to make that move that far over. All of these things are things that they will take into account now. 14 minutes left in the pit window and just about 15.3 in the race left to go, as everything getting very close indeed here at the end of the race. And Mike Jones, you made a statement earlier that you think that the pit stops are going to break up the action. I think it will to an extent, but I think it'll add to it as well, as Martin Lawrence, you mentioned earlier as well, struggling in that Lamborghini. And I just don't think Laguna Seca is a place where that Lamborghini shines very well. And my hat's off to Lawrence for driving his heart out in that thing, because we were riding on board with, I don't know who it was. I think it was Vanborough at the time, and that thing was darting all over the place.
Yeah, I'm actually, I was trying to look over Mr. Callsign's stream to see how Ryan was doing in his Lamborghini. Random is in the pit lane at the moment, so I'm curious where he's going to shake out. It was in 14th. Okay, so he's doing okay. Is Mr. Gill in his Lamborghini? Not too bad. It's a good finish for him considering his struggles through the first couple races. Ricardo's going to come out of the pit lane over in split 4 in P6. He came in, if I'm not mistaken, in P2. He lost
He
a
did.
position a little bit ago.
Yeah,
to
he got
Kumbu.
I'll just put it this way. There was contact with a lap car that was interesting, and that caused him to have a bit of an accident. And yeah, so that's how Kumpu got into the lead. Alvin Bouquet, though, back here in split 1. Excellently orchestrated there. That's an excellent move. That is spick and span, clean as you like. And we'd be remiss if we did not thank all of our partners at some point today for helping bring you this race and every race department, AK Informatica, Raceface, Speed Labs, and Sim Racing GP. More information about all those fantastic people in the description. And while you're down there, why not join the Discord, get involved? You can do more than watch. You can join us. We got a split for every skill level, and we would love to have you. And oh, by the way, since you're fiddling around with the options, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell. We will be back with you, or I will be back with you anyway, for the Night Owl race tomorrow evening. And of course, we have races Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And of course, we would love to have you with us for those. So don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and join us. We love having you here. And thank you all for being a part of the broadcast today. And we hope that you are enjoying the race as much as we are. Lord knows Mike Jones and I can barely be still up here. Been a lot of moves recently, Mike Jones. A lot of moves at the end of this race that has caused me to stand up or withdraw into my seat.
Well, Philippe Samard, is that a track limits penalty, or will that be a steward penalty, Jesse Lee? Did you get anything from Mr. Boswell yet?
I did not.
I did not see. Yeah, so the stewards have not made their decision yet. That means that will be a track cut penalty by Philippe Samard. You know, of course, we saw him likely get that warning earlier for cutting the pit exit. And I think I see Jake Boswell bringing in a slip of paper for him very shortly here as well. I see a big, bright 43 on that one. That might give him a bit more of a penalty and having to shuffle that position back for the track cut as well. Yeah, that is one of the few times I think I've ever seen a drive-through for track cut penalties here at Laguna Seca. We
can assume this: no matter what the stewards decide with him going onto the pit lane, we know that ACC considers that a track cut. So we know in some way that contributed to his drive-through that Kunos gave him. And it obviously was his third warning, I would assume, because he didn't get that immediately after doing that. He must have cut the track again at some place and then got a drive-through penalty. And that's as far as we know. Well, comeback of the day.
5 second penalty.
What a drive for Fabian Piffet, who, quite frankly, was passed around like a beach ball at the start of this race. The damage still very clear on the left side of that car. And, well, it'll be a day where Perseverance will rank supreme for the 195. And like you said, Mike Jones, turns out the stewards have decided a 5-second penalty in addition to the drive-through for the 43 for passing off of the track.
Yeah, passing off the track, 5-second penalty. I think that's fair, Jesse. I mean, you know, in the end, that kind of gives him the position back and gives him a little bit of a hey, don't do that again. Losing a few extra seconds, of course, at this point. That DT, well, as we discussed, is already gonna put him back. But let's go ahead and let's go on board here briefly with our championship leader, George Boothby, back in P10, first place on the positions for cars that already have pit. We're going to take a lap around Laguna Seca with him. Hard on the brakes into the Andretti hairpin. Turn 1, turn 2. Again, really got to V that corner out. Get a good run coming off it, because you really want to make sure you get a good run coming into turn 3 for the slight brake into the right-hander, and then letting off the throttle here, maybe a little bit of a trail brake rather, in through turn 4. Sticking in third gear, up into fourth as you approach turn 5. Looking for the 2 on the right. little bit of a touch of the brakes so you're not too hard on it, down to second, and then early on the gas, up into third, up into fourth for one of the more difficult points on the circuit. Touch of the brakes there, look for that curb as soon as you can, turn in, try to grab the dip before you get back on the throttle, get out to the corkscrew. This is the most interesting corner in GT3 racing, I think, is the corkscrew. And then, of course, rainy curve. Very deceptively fast left-hander. You pretty much just kind of touch the brake and turn itself in. Touch the sausage there, as you pretty much do at every corner here at Laguna Seca. Out through turn 10, hard on the brakes, in through turn 11, down to first gear. Try and get on the gas as early as possible. It is a very, very quick lap around here. That's going to be a 122.944 for George Boothby. Pretty damn close, Jesse Lee, to his fastest lap of the race. Of course, Malinowski and them are running laps even quicker than that at that point. And those guys are just blazingly quick. As I just saw Philippe Samard get disqualified for excessive speeding in the pit lane. That is the first time I think I've ever seen that happen.
So that's an ACC thing, what just happened there. I've seen that once before in an RCI broadcast that I was a part of, and I wasn't quite sure what I was witnessing then, and now for the second time, an excessive speeding in pit lane, the limiter not applied, obviously, for Philippe Samard, and that has caused them to be disqualified by the sim.
Oh no, that was the DC.
Stewards.
It wasn't speeding in the pit lane.
I see.
That was from his drive-through. He didn't serve the drive-through.
Okay, so you have 3 laps, folks, to serve a drive-through penalty after it's assigned to you. If you start your 4th lap, it disqualifies you for that. So Philippe Samard disqualified from the race today for not serving a drive-through penalty, and well, we're forced to wonder why, and also guess. And considering you and I are here to speculate, I'm going to speculate he was frustrated with the whole situation, Mike.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Samard was just realized he made so many mistakes, small mistakes that cost him position. He was having to push to get back up to the top, causing even more slight mistakes. And then, of course, getting the drive-through for track limits here, I think just kind of put him over the top. It's sad because he could have gotten himself some points still, right? I mean, everybody on the grid is still going to get points here. He wouldn't have been even necessarily in last place either. He'd have been back near about I think around P24, P23 maybe, and picked up quite a few points. But unfortunately for Smart, sometimes that happens when you get a little frustrated and kind of realize that you just kind of over it at that point, and that's going to cost him 0 points for the race today for that number 43. Well, looking back at the back of the field again, Jesse Lee, what do we keep saying? There are cars nose to tail in packs of 2, maybe 3 throughout the race. And, well, we've got Yimaz and Kovacs here back fighting for P19 that are nose to tail here with only 6 minutes to go. And that is realistically just about where we kind of expect these guys at this point here on Laguna is just nose to tail all the way through. It's a little difficult to pass, right? So you got to make sure that you kind of make that mistake or let that driver make the mistake out ahead, maybe get him into the Andretti hairpin. We've seen a couple moves in the corkscrew today, even just out of desperation, that have went by quite well. So the question will be, can Kovacs make the move here on Yimaz towards the end of the race?
Well, the easiest thing to do to make a pass around this place is to make it up in the pit lane. Obviously, the second easiest thing to do is wait for him to make a mistake. I think we've seen several drivers attempting to do that today, trying to allow them to make a mistake. And certainly we have seen passes come of that. But also, the what you have to do, especially at the end of the race, when none of that's an option, you have to get that pass in. And those two very close to each other, Kovacs and Yimaz. I think Kovacs is the quicker of the two right now. It'd be interesting to see if they can make that pass. We have 8 cars, actually mark that as 7, as Mark Vart has come in the 24 Ferrari. 7 cars that have not pitted in the race thus far. They have 3 minutes to do so, ergo 2 laps to come into the pit lane and get their stop done. Otherwise, they will be hit with either a hefty penalty or even a disqualification. I'm not sure exactly what you get for not pitting in the pit window or satisfying the pit requirement, but either way, it is going to put you at the back of the field. I can promise you that. And we still have 7 drivers who have elected to stay out as long as possible. Malinowski leading by 6 seconds over Massoud, and Juan Zimis, who was as close as 1.5 seconds to Massoud earlier, has fallen back off of him now. 3.6, 3.7 thereabout, the difference between second and third. Jardier running up in 4th place. I suspect he'll go back down to 5th after the pit stop either way. And Boothby 3.4 seconds behind Leone. So that undercut that Boothby tried did not work, as that gap continues now to go out a little bit, as I think Boothby is going to have to settle for about 5th place, and Jardier 6th. That will not necessarily be great for either of those two, but in a championship fight, Mike Jones, the most important thing that you can do is, when you're not having the greatest day, limit the damage. And I honestly feel like Boothby's done that today.
You know, I'm sitting here looking at the lap times, and I do definitely think that Boothby should be ahead of Honzik. I mean, Boothby lost 7 seconds in the pit. I did not expect him to be anywhere near Kevin Leone after that was all said and done. I mean, it was ridiculous that, you know, or the ridiculous amount of time that he lost in the pit lane because of all that was you know, just going to be excessive, and it definitely cost him the chance to get, you know, into P4. But again, as you said, Jesse, it's not going to matter for the points. I mean, James Parker isn't here today. He's had to use this as his drop round because I believe he's outrunning the SRO stuff. And of course, Fabian Pithett he's well out behind it at this point, right? So Fabian Pithett is, you know, in P10 overall. That's a couple spots behind Boothby, and there might be another spot between them at some point once Honzik kind of gets out of the pit lane as well. So that will put a little bit of distance. Honzik in the pit lane now, and we're going to get a little bit of a taste of what might happen between him and Boothby. He's going to come out of the pit lane. I'm looking at Boothby on my monitor coming out of the final corner at the moment. So he's accelerating now, and that is going to put him well past Jardier by the time he releases his pit limiter. He's going to come in by right now. So there's Boothby, well out ahead of Jardier. Jardier just not able to get the pace down today here at Laguna Seca. He did also have to take a little bit more fuel, perhaps, or just had a little bit of a worse pit stop, as Honzik actually had a 3 seconds longer in the pit than Kevin did. But either way, George Boothby has picked up, you know, 4 seconds on these guys through the race. Malinowski making his pit at the very last moment, along with Juan Zemis. They've just made their pit window. Of course, the pit window does function as you come into the pit lane here within Assetto Corsa Competizione. So you can see that Malinowski and Juan Zemis have both cleared their pit stops, even though the pit window is closed before they drop their jacks. Malinowski, a just dominating race. This is just reminiscent of George Boothby at Imola last week, Jesse.
Well, for Malinowski, the man they call tortellini and the man that I call pasta, and sometimes fast pasta, it has been the day that he wished he would have had the last 2 times out. It just hasn't ended up the way that he would have wanted it. Malinowski in the first 2 rounds had some incidents and some race dramas that kept him from being in the overall picture. Well, today he's had absolutely none of that, and he will almost certainly win this race. In fact, grew his lead in the pit lane. And by the way, unless my eyes are broken, I think Juan Zemis has passed Massoud in the pit lane for 2nd place. A late race little twist of fate here, perhaps. And yes, indeed, Juan Zemis in the 911 has passed Massoud. 5 seconds difference. He was only 3.5 ahead, was Massoud. Juan Zemis, your new 2nd place runner, and he's going to steal extra points today. What a fantastic run of it for him. And for Malinowski, it's going to be a win, the first of the season here for him after a fantastic race. And what a recovery drive. And for Juan Zima, stealing one at the line, gets second. Massoud settles for third. Leone is going to come to the line as well in fourth place, and a well-defended drive. Spent more than half of this race under fire, but will come to the line completely solitary by himself. What a race from him. And George Boothby in fifth place. Mike Jones, what a drive for him to come through the bottom half of the top five, get a top five, and help his championship hopes.
Yeah, and that's really what it is. I mean, Boothby, I don't think it's not even helping his championship hopes. It's solidifying the championship hopes for him at the moment. You know, I mean, a great drive by him, like you said, still in P5 in that McLaren. Just, you know, not the quickest car here at Laguna Seca, but again, the man is a robot. That man will put his car within a millimeter of itself every single lap for 75 minutes, and that is exactly what you need to do here at Laguna Seca. Coming home, locking in and solidifying his position at P1 in the standings. James Parker and Fabian Piffet nowhere to be found on the board today in comparison to Boothby. Piffet, of course, did finish P8, which isn't a bad finish by him, all said and done. But, you know, that gap was already there in the point standings, and that is not what Piffet needed. He needed to be up ahead of Boothby to really close some of that gap, and he did not get there today. Alban Bouquet and Milton Steele-Vassen were P4 and P5 in the championship. Looks like Bouquet and Steele-Vassen 9th and 11th. So overall, again, not too bad of finishes for these guys. And I think that that's going to continue to be a trend throughout the championship, Jesse Lee, is these guys that are finishing kind of, you know, within the top 10-ish throughout the season. We're going to see a bit of a fight from them at the end of the day here in about, another 5 weeks or so as we kind of crest into the end of June and finish up this season. But a big shout out to Jaroslav Honzik, who, of course, did not have a pretty good race one or race two. Came back, still finished in P6 today, even though he lost that place to George Boothby. Jesse, Honzik coming home with a very strong finish in P6 and just kind of getting himself a little bit of points, perhaps jumping a couple spots in the overall rankings. And the Ferrari is going to look strong through the rest of the season as well.
Well, I can tell you what today did do that was different from the first two races. Well, it's a short track, it's a small track, and it's action-packed. And here is the winning move of the race. We couldn't have known it was going to be it at the time, but around the outside is Malinowski. He gets squeezed there a little bit, but he holds on to that second place, and he stays in contention in close contact with then leader Massoud. He would eventually get around him, and it was very important that Malinowski did not get dropped down to third or worse or get involved in any of the melee behind him, but that did not happen. It was clean, and it was absolutely brilliant stuff. And well, if there's one thing I know, this race is going to change the championship standings quite a lot. It was tight coming in. It's going to be all jumbled up next week for race number 4, and it's going to be even tighter. I've been doing some of the preliminary math here just with my trusty calculator, and I have determined that from about second back to fifth or so, it could be just a point or two between each position. It's going to be incredibly close, and this has definitely made next week all the more important, Mike.
It really has, and of course next week we'll be out in Spain, Catalonia in particular, for the Barcelona 60 minutes, and that's going to be a really good race, I think, Jesse, because in the end, I think Barcelona, however much that a lot of drivers don't like Sector 3 of that track, it is always one of the great races that we get to commentate here, right? There's a couple of them that me and you commentate on that are always pretty damn good. Of course, Barcelona being one of them, Hungaroring being another one. We just seem to, me and you, Jesse, just always seem to have great races that we get to watch at Hungaroring. Hungaro isn't on the circuit this time around, but it's something that is always great. And I think Barcelona is going to be fantastic next week. And we're going to see what happens between Boothby and Piffet, as they should be the new P1, P2, as James Parker, of course, using this as his drop round. Of course, across this 8-race championship as well, there is one drop round for these guys. So your worst race or your sign out, whatever it happens to be, will be dropped out of your points record. That means only 7 races will count. So James Parker missing this race doesn't put him out of contention for the championship by any means. And of course, to all the guys who out here finished today, a fantastic drive. Incidents here and there, of course, as we do, especially at tracks like Laguna Seca. But in the end, a great race to watch. Battles up and down the field throughout the whole 75 minutes. Well, Jesse Lee, night out tomorrow. We are at Kyalami. I'll be out on the track, you watching me, rather than me being out here on the box. Kyalami is going to be an interesting one. It's a very, very cold morning on the weather that we've got for South Africa tomorrow, and that should be a very interesting one to watch. I will not sure how I feel about these uber cold temperatures in my 720S, but it's going to be a little interesting trying to keep the tires warm, and I think it should be a blast. You and Joe Gleason, I believe, will be heading up the box.
Yes, indeed, we will be. It's going to be an interesting time. It's going to be my first time commentating with Joe, as far as I know, unless I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure it is. But tune in for some late night
Jesse,
stuff.
Before we dip out, I believe that over on our other voice comms here, we might have our race winner that is ready for a bit of a chat. Stewie, you got his audio. Well, Jesse, Stewie says we're live over here. So, Malinowski, you with us?
Tortellini, you have your ears on, son.
Maybe not.
I don't think we have Tortellini with us. Otherwise, known as Malinowski. There he is. Malinowski, 2 weeks in the doldrums. You didn't quite have the races that you would want, but you absolutely exploded today. Were you ever concerned that you were not going to have a shot to win this race?
Well, the answer no probably would be a bit, from the get-go, I knew that this is the race to win, and I didn't prepare that much. I just, hour before the race, I popped into a practice server, did some ups, and I felt good. So, yeah, that was definitely a race to win, especially if I want to be in contention for the championship after those two unfortunate races, especially the first one. So, objective has been achieved.
Well, there you have it. Looking forward to the future, race 4 and beyond. Do you think you can get back in this championship?
We'll see. The field is extremely competitive, and the calendar is also made in a way that there are various tracks that favor various cars, but also there are various types of races in different lengths, with different kind of pit stops, and so on. So we'll see. It's still a long way to go, so anything can happen. Definitely those first 2 weeks won't help, but I'm positive that I can be up there, maybe not for P1, but to be somewhere high at the leaderboard at the end. I'll definitely fight for it.
Well, you're here, ladies and gentlemen. Malinowski, our race winner from Laguna Seca today. He's going to be fighting for it towards the end. 5 more races to go, Mr. Malinowski. Barcelona next week. Best of luck at that one as well. Hopefully we'll see you towards the top of the grid and fighting up there with George Boothby for that. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a presentation of the Friday World Championship here at RCI TV. We hope you'll join us for tomorrow Night Owl Championship at Kyalami. And, of course, next week will be Barcelona. Me and Jesse will be back for that one. Have a great night.